In order to begin setting a basis for the effectiveness of this model, Kimberly's going to tell you the story of how we first actually needed to try out this model and how it worked, and then we'll explain more specifically the functioning of it.
So in the middle of Making Thrive, there got to be a program in Northern California that was an aerial spray for what was called the light brown apple moth. It's a fruit-infesting moth. We mention it briefly in the movie. And what happened was that there was over $380 million earmarked from Bush Jr. through Homeland Security for what was going to be a 10-year program, so, you know, billion-dollar program, to aerial spray over 7 million people in Northern California for this supposed fruit-infesting moth.
And it was doing no damage whatsoever.
Which was doing no damage. So it started in Monterey, came to Santa Cruz, and then went inland and all the way up to Marin and Berkeley and San Rafael, all over the place. So here we are in the midst of Making Thrive, and it just seemed like, oh no, you know, we have to deal with this, right? It was like being in a war zone. The helicopter's coming over, it's saying stay inside. It doesn't do any damage, but stay inside. And so what happened was we looked and we saw, you know, that there were a lot of people who were concerned about it, but they were all concerned on their own. So we said, all right, let's get everybody who's voicing anything about this together. Invite them over and figure out how to go at this in a really coherent way. Because one of the things that by identifying the sectors, as we have done here, every aspect of human endeavor is actually somewhere in one of these sectors. And it turns out that people are naturally inclined toward one thing or another. You know, Foster and I were really interested in following the money and figuring out who was funding this thing. Somebody else was really interested in figuring out what was the health impact on human beings. Another was on, turned out to be dead birds all over the beaches after the spray, so they wanted to do analysis on the birds. Somebody else wanted to get the Freedom of Information Act to find out what some of the was going on behind there. Lawsuits. So we had lawsuits, and so people naturally, some were artists, some was a web developer who was willing to set up a website, someone else could make flyers, someone was good with the media. So we have this room full of people, as I guess would happen here, and we'll find out tonight, that actually people were naturally inclined to take on different parts of this issue, but each had been thinking, oh my God, we have to stop this, and thought they had to do it all. And so when we got organized and we signed up by sector and said, all right, we're going to take on this. And so we formed we were in the economic team, and someone else was in the health, and someone else was in the arts, and someone else was in the science, and someone else in justice for the law. And Foster will describe more explicitly, because we really want to do that together here tonight with you and your issues that you're taking on, is what happened was we got so well organized because we could all go off and do our part, come back, report, and move ahead, so that we had every bit of progress that we made, we could send ahead to the communities that were going to be hit next, like up in Marin. And it turned out, so this was a 10-year, billion-dollar program, $380 million a year that they had. Homeland Security, Bush, it was heavy. And we stopped it in 6 months. And when the Freedom of Information Act revealed some of the internal correspondence, one of them, this was so proud. I told my kids, I am so proud of this. I want this like on my tombstone or something. It said, we had anticipated some resistance in Santa Cruz, but we didn't know it would be so well organized. So anyway, it really gave, so it turned out what we had thought was a distraction to our project of Making Thrive really turned out to be the blessing of giving us hands-on grassroots experience of organizing in a community around this model that we had developed, as Foster mentioned, in a think tank years before, of how do you actually do this. And so this is something that we'll describe in more detail and actually work out. But the best thing about it is that it really who we are and what we know about ourselves turns out to be really relevant in our activism, because what you love, your passion, your purpose, all of that turns out to be the thing that you can bring to bear. And when you're together in a room and you find out, geez, someone else loves that part and someone else can do this part, they're really, you understand that we need each other No one can do it. None of us can do it on our own. We have our part to offer. You have your part to offer. And that's what builds the community, so that as we encounter the different problems that are so serious and that have such time issues on them, that we find out that we actually have what it takes in this room. There will be every part of it filled.